We have the next panel available. It's a continuation to the part 1. We are having part 2 of good technology adoption. We are going to discuss about the reusability and interoperability for the DPG solutions. So this panel will be moderated by Robert Karanja from Co-Develop. Can I invite him on the stage, please? Welcome, Dr. Karanja. Now I would like to welcome our panelists. Hani Eskandar from ITU. John Lloyd from DPGA. And Nagarajan Santhanam from MOSIP. It's a pleasure to have you all.
Good afternoon, everyone. I will protest and refuse to proceed until I receive a response. Thank you. Good afternoon. I know it's late in the day. Some of us may have had a heavy meal of injera and dorowat. It's warm in this room, right? But I'll try and keep it interesting, right? So my name is Robert Karanja, and I am Senior Director at Co-Develop. Some of you may have heard of Co-Develop. We are a non-profit fund, a non-profit institution that supports the adoption of digital public infrastructure by countries around the world. And so we do this by investing in digital public goods, DPGs such as Mojaloop, for example, OpenCRVS. We also provide targeted technical assistance to countries through various partners. We support the ecosystem by investing in civil society organizations in various countries around the world. And we also fund research that looks at digital public goods. And I would encourage all of you to go to our website, codevelop.fund, codevelop.fund, to read up more on what we do. Thank you. So first of all, I'd like to apologize on behalf of my panel. We did not plan to have an all-male panel. We did have a very distinguished female panelist, Dr. Tina George, but she had to leave a bit early, so please accept my apologies. Right? It was not planned. We're going to be speaking on good technology adoption, session 2. What you heard just before this was session 1. And we're looking at the fostering the reuse of technology for sustainable adoption of digital public infrastructure. And I have 3 very distinguished panelists with me. From my immediate left, Hani from the ITU, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves in a few minutes. We also have Jonathan, DPGA and 15.5. And finally, we have my good friend Nagar from MOSIP. And I just wanted to provide some context or some background before I get to the panel. And our context really is when we look at countries and the amount of money that they're investing to implement digital transformation strategies around the world, we often find that these countries are starting from scratch. And what we are trying to argue here this afternoon is that there is a great advantage in reusing technology. So not starting from scratch, but actually using that technology that exists. And reuse is actually one of the core tenets of open source. And we can do this by identifying various technology tools, data and frameworks. And by doing this, governments can achieve sustainability by bringing efficiency in terms of costs and time. In many of our economies, particularly on the continent, I feel many of our countries can benefit greatly from adopting a reuse approach of technology, and we can also gain socio-economic benefits. Adopting the principles of reuse in the implementation of DPI has some interesting implications, particularly around the speed and quality of implementation. Countries can also de-risk themselves from technology or vendor lock-in, and we can enable an iterative improvement of technology and create an enabling environment to share learnings and best practices. So my panel this afternoon is going to speak to this, and we'll discuss some important considerations that emerge around this subject. And I'll join them shortly so that we can get started. Thank you. So to my immediate left is Hani. Hani, I'll just ask you to briefly introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, what you do, your organization, and anything else interesting. Maybe a fun fact, right, about Hani. So feel free. And parental advisory or discretion is advised.
Okay, thanks very much, Robert, and good afternoon. My name is Hani Eskandar. I'm the head of the Digital Services Division at the ITU. I'm based in Geneva. So I'll be talking from my role as the kind of guiding the ITU role in terms of digital services. But also I have another hat, which is part of the GovStack. So probably you heard maybe at some point the GovStack. So I'm going to share also some perspective of how we see the whole digital transformation from a DPI perspective, and what kind of resources we are trying also to make available to accelerate the process of digitalization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hani. And next to Hani is John. John, kindly introduce yourself, who you are, your organization, and what you do. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I know there are some familiar faces who have seen me already during the conference, but my name is John Lloyd. I also wear two hats, like Hani. I work for the Digital Public Goods Alliance as a Director of Advocacy, and I also am the Program Director of the 50 and 5 campaign, which many of you have either heard about or are participating in already, which is great. And my fun fact is I own more than two hats.
Thank you, John. Hani, you forgot your fun fact.
Let me think about it.
Okay, thank you. And next to John is Naga. Naga, please go ahead. I'm sure everybody in this room knows you, but feel free to reintroduce yourself.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Naga. I'm the Chief Dissemination Officer for MOSIP and OpenG2P. I've been with MOSIP for the past 3 years now. Before MOSIP, I was working in Johannesburg for the past 9 years. So Africa is my second home. I'm really glad, whenever I come back to Africa. Fun fact, I don't know, because I'm currently wearing two hats, I think, but there are many other hats. I'm trying to find out.
Thank you. Thank you, Naga. And welcome, everyone. So I'll start off with Hani. Hani, my first question to you is, how would you say that countries can build reusable technologies and resources that are not only modular, but also standards-based and interoperable, which can avoid duplication and siloed standalone solutions?
Yeah. Thanks for the question. I think one of the first things that we hear from countries when we kind of interact with them is the fact that they would like to digitize hundreds of services across all sectors of economy. And the big question is, how can we do it? How can we accelerate the process, but also how we do it in the right way? So I think the concept of reusability is almost mandatory. I mean, you cannot think that if you have 400, 500, 600 servers that you are going to build each one standalone. It's just not possible, and it will create a huge fragmentation, scale up would be a problem, etc. So I think the concept of reusability needs to be very much embedded in the way we approach digital transformation. So the question becomes, what kind of things you would like to make reusable? And if you think about it, I think there are, at all the different levels you can think of reusability. From the back end, from the front end, from the data, even from the tools. So let me maybe give quick examples of kind of reusable resources that countries can start to build And I very much agree with the concept is let's try with one use case which is compelling to create the kind of the alignment, etc. But while we do this, we need to kind of start to put in place some of those reusable resources. I think the first one which we've been really focusing on is the concept of DPI, the back end. The way one can understand the concept of DPI is to say, if you are thinking what are the reusable pieces of a DPI, you need to break down the complexity into small pieces, where you can say, okay, this small piece, which is called identity, I can make it and scope it as a building block, where I can provide some meaningful requirements and specification and potentially even open interfaces that can help countries as a starting point to build up this capability in a way that is interoperable. So what we have done in GovStack is that we looked at a large number of services across different sectors, agriculture, health, education, etc. And we came up with a list of between 25 to 30 reusable building blocks. And we tried to scope those building blocks to become very narrow scoped in a way that it can be built in a reusable, and you can design it in an abstracted manner that it could be reusable. Otherwise, it would be bespoke and it's not reusable. So what we have done as a first step in the GovStack is that we are trying to provide some best practices specification by compiling best practices from different countries so that each building block should be designed in a way that is standard-based, secure by design, protecting privacy, using open standards, open interface, etc. So currently we have 15 building blocks. Some of them are the one that we've been talking about, ID, payment, etc. But now we are even expanding on other types of building blocks, e-signature, GIS, etc. And we are adding, and now we are working with CDPI and with MOSIP on the digital wallet as well. So that's on the DPI level. But I think the concept of reusability could be also taken at the service level. Let me explain, because you can, if you would like to facilitate and accelerate the design of the solutions and the services, sorry, the design of the services, I think you can use exactly the same approach of identifying building blocks to identify what you can service block. Meaning that you can identify some patterns of services that are very common. Like, for example, I am a citizen, I would like to register in a kind of a government service and be part of a registry. So this type of a service is pattern, it's repeated across so many things. It could be applying for a permit, it could be applying for any type of authorization, etc. So if we are able to create reusable service blocks based on some generic patterns, and we provide the blueprint, how you can design those services using the DPI. This is something that we are currently working on GovStack, is trying to break down the services into those kind of reusable blocks where you can you don't need to reinvent the wheel, and even it creates some consistency in the way you interact with the citizens. So we are now currently trying to identify some of those common services that could be repeated and designed in an abstract manner. And we are also doing the interface piece, because also we are trying, you need to have also reusable user interface patterns, which we created in the GovStack. We have, that you can pull some of the resources. Maybe to move on the tools, it's very important actually, because one of the things that comes very, very frequently in countries, how can we accelerate the service building using potentially those patterns, but with tools that are also reusable and also adopt low-code type of approach. So now we are working on this concept of a service builder that is using low-code approaches that you can not only pull those service patterns to create a service, and each service is already designed to use the DPI. Of course, if you don't have DPI, all this work doesn't make sense, because the whole thing is based on the DPI. But from what we have seen, we need also to work on the service level, because at the end of the day, what really government are interested in is the services, not on the infrastructure. I mean, they appreciate the fact that DPI, etc., but what is important for them is the service. What are we going to offer to the citizens? So there is a lot of work that needs to happen to accelerate the service design and to make it as normalized, as standardized, as reusable as possible to make this kind of happen. I can expand also on reusable data sets, because this is another big thing. So without going, one of the building blocks that we are currently working on is how you create shared data repositories, how you create shared data sets. And this is whole approach of data governance, how you extract, how you create unified data models to be able to extract the data and put it in a shared data repository, data lake, or a warehouse. You run analytics, etc. This is another big thing for decision making and also for enabling proactive services. Many countries use the data to identify and kind of shortlist targeted citizens where they can proactively send them an SMS to say, you are eligible for this service without even the citizen ask, and the citizen just need to respond yes, which means he gives his consent or her consent, and this triggers the type of services. So all those kind of reusability assets and resources, I think we can definitely, can really accelerate the process, and I think we need to think of how we make kind of those resources available. And lastly, and this is another thing that we are working in, we need also to have a reusable sandbox environment where any kind of department, any kind of service can come and build up those services quickly. So maybe just, this is the type of reusable resources that the GovStack is working on, and I'll be very glad to give you, maybe, and the last point you asked about the fun fact. So I have been trying to see, I'm Egyptian, but then I traveled to Canada and I got a Canadian citizenship. And then now I'm in Switzerland, so I get the Swiss citizenship. And I have my own UN passport, so I'm trying to identify where should I fit. But I think the fun fact that I really feel a universal citizen to some extent now.
Thank you. Thank you, Hani. I'm going to shift gears a bit and just go to Naga. Naga, I was just looking at the recent MOSIP statistics. MOSIP has worked with at least 17 countries around the world. And I think currently about 110 million people are registered on MOSIP. You have some countries that are in pilot stage. You have some countries that are in exploratory stage. And I believe you also have some countries that have gone to full national rollout. So my question to you is, when you look at your engagement with all these varied countries around the world, what would you say have been some of the key barriers that these countries have encountered as they work towards adopting systems such as MOSIP? And those barriers could be either the barriers that the countries are facing or even MOSIP as a DPG is facing. Yeah.
In fact, the key barrier is even selecting a platform like MOSIP. That is the key barrier, because once they come into MOSIP ecosystem and they start experiencing the pilots and stuff, with MOSIP, then they become extremely comfortable. But the most difficult part is for them to get convinced, getting out of their barrier and then adopting MOSIP. The first and the foremost thing, irrespective of any country, right? I give a presentation about MOSIP, blah, 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 open source, philanthropic, everything is free. After all those things, irrespective of country, right? The first question that comes is, this is too good to be true. So are you saying that we can adopt MOSIP, first year is free, after that you will charge? Because people don't understand this model at all. So we have to really again and again, multiple times reiterate about the concept of open source, about the concept of philanthropy, capacity building, how the country is going to be, transformed using that. So that is a typical question, I get every time, when we go to the country. The second one is the typical one. The technology people in the country say, oh my God, open source is not secure. So we have written some white papers on that. There are quite a lot of white papers in the globe which touches this point. So we have to explain them a bit more in detail. Linux is open source, and predominant of the world's banking population uses Linux, to a larger degree. The third is a funny one, where they say, okay, fine. So you are telling your philanthropy there is no cost. So will you steal my data? So we have to say, no. We don't implement MOSIP for you. We enable the capacity. We have a very rich system integrator ecosystem. They will implement it for you. So the data is fully encrypted, and the encryption key sits with the country. Apart from this, there are some genuine concerns like, yeah, you say it's an open source system, but we don't have capacity or knowledge, in our country to anchor that and take it forward. That is yet another thing. And there's also a rumor which people ask that this being an open source system, is it going to take a lot of time to implement? Will there be a lot of customizations that we need to do because you call MOSIP as a platform? So is it going to take a lot of time for us to turn around the system and make it live? And in recent times, these are different questions at different phases, okay? In recent times, I'm also facing this question where people say, okay, you sign for a national rollout, MOSIP signs a MOU anywhere between 3 to 5 years based on the country's need. So what happens after that? Right? Will MOSIP renew the MOU, or you'll just leave us and let go, or how does that work? So these are some of the typical barriers that the country has. But trust me, I'm not saying because I work in MOSIP. Once a country starts doing a pilot or a national rollout, I mean, they get really, really impressed. The way we deal with them, the professionalism we carry, and the pragmatism we do, and the capacity building, most importantly, which starts from day one. Let it be a pilot or a national rollout. They get really fascinated into that. Is what I can assure, and is my experience so far.
Thank you, Naga. I know we have some Kenyans in this room. I'm not going to ask them to raise their hands. That's my home country. But I would encourage you, when you get another chance, to please come back. I know you came once. Come back. We desperately need MOSIP as an ID system.
I came thrice. I met Mr. Ruto twice.
Yes. I know you met the president.
I don't mind coming again.
Yeah. There's some difficulties, but hopefully we'll be able to sort it out soon. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Naga. John, we've heard a lot about 50-5, and it has implications in terms of the adoption of digital public infrastructure by countries, the exposure of digital public goods around the world, and there are very many implications. I've heard so many different definitions about 50-5, so I wanted to hear it from the horse's mouth, right? Several people in this room have heard about it and would like to know, how does 50-5 apply to their countries? What does it mean? And how do countries join the campaign?
Sure. And thanks, everybody. I'm the last speaker on the last day in the last session. So I really appreciate that you're all still here and somewhat awake, which is great. So 50-5, really the genesis of 50-5 came about from wanting to capture a lot of the energy that the DPI approach, the architectural approach has in terms of being able to transform societies and really help countries achieve the SDGs by 2030. And really what we also wanted to do was make sure that we're speeding up countries' learning and adoption journeys, giving them a chance to share technologies, ideally as digital public goods, with each other, and really give them a platform to celebrate achievements. So the goal of 50-5 is in 5 years, 50 countries will have signed up to commit to implementing at least one layer of their DPI stack in a manner that's safe, inclusive, and interoperable. And it's really that simple. And so we already have some countries in the room who have signed up, which is great. Our host, Ethiopia, one of the countries that we launched with, which is amazing. Plus we had 10 others sign up at the time. We're up to 15 right now. And really, when countries are signing up, they're committing to building out at least one layer of their foundational DPI. But really, there's some other factors as well. And one is a willingness to use or at least or share technologies as digital public goods. Another thing is being able to share learnings and best practices. We saw a little bit of that yesterday in the panel that I hosted here about the procurement of open source. 3 of the panelists were already part of the 50 in 5 campaign, which was great. And then, of course, advocating for the DPI approach, which is really what we've seen a lot here during MOSIP Connect, which is taking the architectural whole of government approach. And I think that's really key. The more countries that are speaking about it, the faster we can actually hit those goals, the SDGs, by 2030. And really, in terms of benefits for countries as well, we're seeing a lot of benefits from the international cooperation and collaboration. We're seeing bonds strengthen between the countries that are participating in the campaign. We're seeing, as Hani was saying, there are a lot of shared use cases where a country may have solved an issue already, and that means that when another country in discussions is facing the same issue, they can overcome that hill much, much faster than if they were going to go it alone. There's also a whole bunch of great partners in the background of 50 in 5. So it's been co-coordinated by the Digital Public Goods Alliance and Co-Develop, but we have GovStack are involved. We've got the Inter-American Development Bank. We have UNDP, UNICEF, DIAL, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and lots of other organizations as well, all involved in helping countries achieve those DPI ambitions. Another thing that we're really seeing as well is that when countries are signing up, they're becoming part of the global agenda on DPI as well. Again, advocating for that DPI approach, but we're making sure that when countries sign up, they're actually being celebrated for their achievements. And we're planning at the Summit of the Future, which is in September, to really celebrate every country that signed up by having an event celebrating the achievements since we launched in November. So the campaign is still very young, just over 4 months old, and we're already seeing great progress with the countries who are collaborating in the campaign. And ultimately, we're going to see lower costs and faster implementation, and that means greater service delivery to citizens, and that means that we're hitting those SDGs, which is the most important thing. The actual impact on the ground is going to be much more impactful as we're implementing, as we're seeing these countries working together to implement DPI. And your last question was how to get involved. Very easy. You can contact me. My email address is john, which is no H, at 50in5, no dashes, .net. Or you can just visit 50in5.net and all the information is there. Come up and talk to me if you like. I'm happy to pass my WhatsApp over or anything like that as well, and we can have another conversation. But yeah, it's very, very simple. All the information's on the website as well.
Thank you very much, John. And I think at this point, I will shift over to the audience in case there are any questions from the floor for any of my panelists.
So this is for John. So for this 15.5, when a country signs up, what do they get? And second is, do they have any timeline on what they should do? If I just sign up and I'm celebrated, I'm happy to sign. But what is the responsibility at my end if I sign up?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So in terms of signing up, there's actually nothing to sign. So the term signing up is sort of disingenuous, but yeah, there's no agreements, there's no fee to pay or anything like that. When you sign up, it's you just have to make some sort of public indication. So that could be a press release, a blog post. Some countries have done a full press conference. And I will say it doesn't really matter where you are in your DPI journey. So we have countries that are very advanced, have very built out DPI, for example, Estonia or Singapore. And we have countries signing up that are just starting out in their DPI journey. And that's kind of the whole point. So every country can learn from each other. Even the advanced countries in their DPI journeys are learning a lot. And really, part of the benefit of 50 in 5 is we talk to every country to find out what their DPI ambitions are, and we tailor the learning and best practice events, convenings, or other opportunities to make sure that countries are learning what they need to learn, or if they're doing an especially good job, are being celebrated for doing those things. So really it's providing a platform to you if you're best in class, but if you're looking for learning opportunities from other countries or want to collaborate, the whole point of the campaign is to make those connections and speed all of that up rather than sort of doing it organically. So that's sort of like one of the main benefits is the support that's provided by the campaign is going to be tailored based on each country's individual needs and goals.
Hi, thanks for this very informative session. So I am Parankush from Ernst & Young. So my question is more on reusability, right, and the theme around it, which also means that you get to reuse from multiple DPGs, say, which means that you can have multiple options. So do you feel that you need to have a framework whereby you can have a very healthy way by which you can have multiple DPGs offering the same kind of solutions but different variants of it? Because sometimes when you have too many options, it becomes kind of confusing as well as to which one do you pick and which one fits the purpose the best.
This is exactly the efforts that we try to do in the GovStack, is how to provide countries with a relatively neutral, technology and solution agnostic set of requirements against which they can make choices, informed choices, about the type of DPG or even commercial product that, or even if they wish to develop their own product. I think the most important thing that the whole objective, at least from how we see it in GovStack, is to really increase the design capacity of governments, really being able to be better positioned to identify the right requirements and set the right architecture. Then open up for the market to say what kind of DPGs or products you have and make it like a free, open kind of competition between those products. And I think this is probably will help countries to move very much away from taking a product and have to kind of comply with the product as opposed to the product comply with the requirements. It's not an easy task because it's everything. There are so many different ways to do it, and we had to make a lot of kind of discussion. What could be an MVP for each building block? What could be the minimum requirements that we think are best practices? And as you can imagine, this is also creating some resistance from those who are not complying with the requirements. So we are getting a lot of feedback. Why this kind of requirement? This is not correct, etc. Our role is also to try to explain why we have made those design choices. And from what we have seen in the experiences that we had, is that there are still gaps even at the supply side about how to build and integrate the DPI. Even for advanced system integrator, this is not yet a skill that they have. And also how you implement DPI in resource kind of constrained environment, that's add another layer of complexity. So I think the best way to address it is to try to come up with objective, well-explained design choices and requirements, and let the countries understand that, own it, customize it, and then open for the market. So this is how I think it needs to be free competition at the end, even with open source and non-open source.
Thank you so much, the moderator. My question goes to John. I don't think I've understood the difference between the Alliance and 15.5. Are they one and the same, or these are two different entities? And if a country signs up, say, for 15.5, does it become automatically a member of the Alliance, or it is a different arrangement? Because we know that alliances sometimes are created and then they become contributory, or they come with very stringent obligations to the members. So are these two and the same? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And they are not the same. It just so happens that the Digital Public Goods Alliance is helping to coordinate 15.5. So the DPGA is a multi-stakeholder alliance. We have about 40 members at the moment. It's made up of countries, multilaterals, UN institutions, companies, non-profits, and really the purpose is when countries are doing DPG relevant activities or any of the members, that is really what qualifies you to be part of the Digital Public Goods Alliance. 15.5 is an advocacy campaign at its heart, and the idea is to join all of the different DPI initiatives out there under one kind of umbrella to make sure that everything's coordinated and aligned and that there's no duplication going on. So we don't want countries having the same conversation with 50 different partners. We ideally want to coordinate those partners within the alliance, within the coordination group, to make sure that countries are able to implement their DPI in a safe and inclusive and interoperable way and do it quickly. And you don't need to be implementing DPGs to be part of the 50 and 5. As long as you're working on implementing one layer of your foundational DPI, so that's ID, payments, or data exchange, that qualifies you for participation in 50 and 5. And just, it's really a mindset approach when it comes to 50 and 5. There's, it's having that willingness to share learnings and best practices with each other. And I think we're seeing here at MOSIP Connect, there's really that mindset about working together. It's the open source approach, really. So yeah, that's more the differentiation between the two. It just so happens that quite a lot of the countries participating in 50 and 5 are also Digital Public Goods Alliance members. And that's because at their core, digital public goods are about collaboration, sharing, and really speeding up each other's journeys. So there's a bit of overlap, but they are different.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm being told we are out of time. So if you'd like to have ongoing discussions with any members of the panel, please find them at coffee and have bilateral discussions. I'd like to thank my panel and also thank the audience for sitting very patiently with us and asking very probing questions, even when it was very warm this afternoon in Addis Ababa. So thank you so much.